at any point in history. The theme of today's conversation is Mountains Calling, Literature and Society in Tibet. We have Ms. Tenzin Dickey, widely published poet, writer and translator, and Mr. Tenzin Sundui, poet, writer and activist, both with Tibetan roots. I request both our panelists to kindly come to the stage and take their seats. And now request you to kindly start the session. Thank you.
So, I think we have to say Losa Tashidele, Happy Tibetan New Year, Happy Bhutanese New Year, Happy New Year to everyone. And actually we have some celebratory Tibetan cookies.
Yeah, so today is the 9th day of the Tibetan New Year, Losa. And we are just missing out all the joy and festivities that are happening in the Tibetan community. So, and we brought with us khapse. These are Tibetan biscuits that are prepared in the Tibetan community. We brought with us here. I'll request Rinzila to help. Yes.
These are all homemade khapse, made with love. Since, you know, we had to be away from Losar in Dharamsala, in Kathmandu, in Lhasa, we brought Losar here to you.
This is the greeting scarf, what we call khada. Thank you. I'm not usually a good singer, but this is for the necessity. So,
thank you so much. We're really just so pleased to be here. And I actually wanted to, since we're both here, I wanted to say some more words about Tenzin Sundu, actually.
We can flatter each other.
I have to flatter you. Because I think in India, you know, apart from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, maybe you are the second most recognizable Tibetan in India. You go all over India speaking to youth, speaking to students, speaking to everyone, talking about Tibet, reading your poems, singing your songs sometimes, bringing khapse, but really just telling the story of Tibet, which at this point, you know, the story of Tibet is also an important part of the story of India. We are now very intertwined in our histories and in our destinies. And you are sort of a living bridge of this. You are a very important link in the Tibetan-Indian friendship and in Tibetan-Indian history. And for me personally, actually, Tenzin Sundu is a personal hero and a literary inspiration. It was his work that first inspired me to start writing. So,
so in the Tibetan community that we represent today, we are both born in India. In fact, I still live in India. I live in Dharamshala, Himachal Pradesh. And according to Indian constitution, it makes me Indian citizen. But 1 lakh Tibetans living in India, we have not accepted Indian citizenship. We still hope and yearn to return home, and therefore we have asked for Government of India to allow us to maintain our identity as Tibetan. So therefore, Government of India gives us a paper called RC, Registration Certificate, which says that we are registered to be living in India as a foreigner, and we have to renew our stay every year. So this is a paper that I carry with me all the time wherever I travel. And this paper, all Tibetans above the age of 16, they have to make this paper. It's called RC, Registration Certificate. So this one says you are born in India, but you are a Tibetan national and you can stay in India for a period of 1 year. This means we cannot vote in India, we cannot take any facilities, provisions that are reserved only for citizens. For us, more than taking benefits from here, our goal of returning to Tibet is much more treasurable, and this is something that we all keep. And therefore, even though we are stateless, not citizen of any country, we do not mind, because our dream is much more sacred for us.
So my story is, I think actually, so it starts with, of course, I think both Sundi and mine, our stories begin with the occupation of Tibet in 1949, completed in 1959. You know, by then we lost our country. Our parents and our grandparents came, literally walked across the Himalayas into Nepal, into Bhutan, into India. Over 100,000 refugees, and we were both born in North India, in Himachal Pradesh, near the Kullu Manali Valley, in the Kullu Manali Valley, near the river Bias. My grandparents actually back then worked as road laborers, building part of this road. And I know that you actually were born by the roadside. Your family was also working as road laborers. I mean, all the Tibetans who first came into India had to, you know, do many kinds of work, and a majority of them worked as coolies on these roads. And both of us are products of that history.
Yeah. So when Diki was in school, her parents were teachers, and her parents were our teachers. So when she was this little, we were in 5th or 6th standard. So we had seen her grow from a baby to this girl. So you see, there is this almost a kind of a generation gap. So I fall in the 2nd generation. My parents came from Tibet. I become 2nd generation. Now my generation has already a new generation of children who are born and now studying in India. So what does it mean living in exile? What does it mean is, strangely, we seem to be living in a dream. My expression is not that we lost our country. We lost the freedom of our country. Our country is still there, and we believe that the Chinese are there temporarily, just as how the Britishers were here temporarily, like for about 200 years. So we look at China in this way, that they are there temporarily. One day they will go back to their own country.
And then we will go back to ours.
And we will go back to our own country. And I have personally made a promise. Yeah, this can go on. This can go on. This is for. So there is this Tibetan kapse special biscuit made in that. So this is for all of us. So let it keep going. Yes, for everybody. Yeah. Let it keep going on. Yeah, if you don't know past, just let it go. Yeah. So anyway, so the thing is, we are personally we are cut from the root of Tibet. But even though we are here, we cannot settle down here. Dil nahi manta. We cannot settle down here. And because the political situation is so complicated, and looking at China's political, military, economic strength, the future looks bleak. So where does it keep us then? And how do we still maintain our resilience, our hope? These are the things that are going to come in our writings and our literatures that we are going to talk about.
I think, we're waiting to go back. And one very important thing that we do while we wait is maintain that connection to our homeland. And I think for you and also for me personally, one very significant way of maintaining it is through writing, through interrogating that connection, through putting it down on paper and sort of understanding exactly what it means to me. I was just speaking earlier about how, the fact that we are not in Tibet, the fact that our homeland, that Tibet is an absence in our lives, I think for me the best way to explain it is as if, you take a blank piece of paper, and if you're drawing on it, if you're sketching on it, whatever you are sketching, it's the blank page that makes you see the drawing, right? It's the absence of the page that defines what you then put on it. And I think for us, Tibet is that great absence that is a very important part of the definition of our lives. So I think I will start reading from the introduction to my book, Old Demons, New Deities, 21 Short Stories from Tibet. So it is an edited anthology of modern Tibetan short fiction that came out in 2017. And Tenzin Zindu's story is also one of the stories in the book. And yes.
So before she reads from her book, this book, Old Demon, New Deities, this in the Tibetan language and Tibetan writing in English, this is the first collection of Tibetan fiction in an anthology. So now what you see is what India has been doing, studying and reading and writing English for the past 200 years. For us, it's been only 50 years. Ever since China invaded Tibet, we came to India, we started to learn from ABC. Before that, we did not know English. So only after coming into India, we started to read English. My immediate seniors and the older generation, and mine, and now this generation. So we have started to write in English. And therefore, the first collection of fiction, short stories, is this book that she edited, and she's going to read from that.
And so it is about literature, and it is about exile. I was around 12 when I saw my first Tibetan film. I had no idea what I was seeing. This was at my Tibetan boarding school in Dharamsala, the capital of exiled Tibet. One night, our usual evening study session was cancelled. Instead, the school monitors herded us into the main hall. A white sheet hung as a screen on stage, and we watched the images projected onto it. A Tibetan man wearing army fatigues gets off a bus. With his crew cut and military physique, he's clearly a soldier in the Tibetan unit of the Indian Army, a soldier retired and returning home to his Tibetan settlement in the Indian South. Carrying an oversized duffel bag and with a stereo loudly blaring Bollywood music on his shoulder, he saunters into the alleys of the settlement as kids watch him admiringly. He learns English from a Tibetan woman in a scene that causes the hall to ring with delighted laughter, as my classmates and I see mirrored on the screen our own struggles with foreign languages, Hindi and English. She tells him he's an idiot, and he annoys her by saying things like, if P-U-T is put, then why isn't C-U-T kut? At the end of half an hour, the man and the woman run into the fields and chase each other around a tree in the leitmotif of all Hindi filmy prem kahaniyan. I watched the whole thing, entranced and bewildered. It was only at the very end of the half hour, when the couple circled the tree in the recurring Indian cinematic trope of romantic love, that I finally realized with a jolt what I was watching. This was a Tibetan film, a Tibetan romantic comedy. I had never seen a Tibetan film before. There were none. There were no Tibetan films, no Tibetan short stories, no Tibetan novels. Juno Diaz says, you know how vampires have no reflections in the mirror? If you want to make a human being a monster, deny them, at the cultural level, any reflection of themselves. We grew up, those of us in exile, but also those of us who grew up in Tibet, all of us, without reflections. Why was that? Why did we grow up as, to use Edwige Danticat's phrase, literary orphans? 1 second. My family on both sides left Tibet when the Chinese came and followed the Dalai Lama into exile. I was born and raised in one of the Tibetan refugee communities in North India. As a function of growing up in Tibet in India, a young society, an exile community trying to reroot itself in foreign soil, we were cut off from our historical past, from our historical literature and culture. Of course, for Tibetans growing up on the other side of the mountains, this break from the past was imposed by the Chinese state. This separation from our literary past was compounded by the fact that modern Tibetan literature was still in its infancy. Thus, on both sides of the Himalayas, we grew up orphaned from our literature. We were missing the point of departure, the runway from which to lift off. For the young reader in me, this meant a peculiar kind of abandonment and isolation, the lack of one's reflection in the surfaces and in the depths around oneself, an insular isolation that only makes itself known when something finally pierces it. For me, that moment was when I read Tenzin Sundu's poem, When It Rains in Dharamsala. When it rains in Dharamsala, raindrops wear boxing gloves. That's how it goes. I read it, electrified, and began to write a poem. It was not just that I knew the rain in Dharamsala, it was that I knew Tenzin Sundu, and he was just like me. I had always been a reader, but that was the first time I thought maybe I could be a writer as well.
I share the common experience with all of us here in the Northeast of reading and writing English as second language. But the stranger experience is, because I was born in a Tibetan community and growing up in a Tibetan refugee school, our school was poor, we didn't have a library. I first learned writing English from Tinkle comic books. For me, Tinkle comic books were the first encyclopedia I've ever encountered. I could read about, for example, igloos of the Arctics. I learned about Alaska. I learned about coconuts of Kerala. I learned about difference between cosmonauts and astronauts. I learned about I read stories of Chacha Chaudhary. I loved Supandi, the character. So when I made the first sentence, I am, he is, they are, these started from Tinkle comic books. We didn't have a library. And I always hated the textbooks. So it was much later when I went to Bombay. I was doing my MA in English literature in Bombay. From there, I started to write. In a way, as a writer, I started very late because I didn't have the language facility. But I was fortunate that there was a time when some of the best Indian writers in English were alive. I made friends with, you'll be jealous, Nissim Miskil, Don Morris, Arun Kulatkar, Dilip Chitre, Eunice D'Souza, so many. These were the writers who were living, reading in cafes. In Bombay, in Kalagura, there used to be a small cafe called Wayside Inn. At one point of time, there were Javed Akhtar, Gulzar, Arun Kolatkar and Don Morris, 4 of them reading together on one stage in this cafe, and there were only 25 listeners. And I was there among them. So my writing really started from Bombay. More than the Bombay the university, I learned from Bombay the city. So I started to write. I think the first provocation to me writing was needing to explain my face. And I think, again, this is a common experience. It's only in here in the Northeast and in the Himalayas we are safe. The moment we step out of that, we become Nepali, Ching Chong, Ping Pong, Momo, Chinese. So the first thing that is coming at you in your own country is, who are you? Where are you from? So having to answer this, I composed my first line. I'm Indian, except for my chinky Tibetan face. So this was my first utterance in describing myself. Then, living in Bombay, I wrote this poem called My Tibetanness. Now this phrase, Tibetanness, later got used by some of the intellectuals and researchers. But I thought of this phrase, Tibetanness, as if to talk about it, or there are some criteria. So in that poem, I'm writing this line to toned Bombay people. So there I say, at every checkpost and office, I am an Indian Tibetan. My registration certificate I renew every year with a salam, a foreigner born in India. And this is reality. And then in another poem I'm saying, the Tibetan in Mumbai likes to flip through the midday. Midday is a tabloid in Bombay. Everybody's reading midday. The Tibetan in Mumbai likes to flip through the midday, loves FM, but doesn't expect a Tibetan song. So we may not demand, but we can nudge a little and say, we are not expecting. If you play a Tibetan song, we'll be very happy. Today's Losar, but we are not expecting. So I think these are the subtle lines of bordering identities, being Bombay, at the same time being the other. So I started with these kind of expressions where I see myself and writing. I'll read one more poem. These are, of course, just stray lines from different other places. So when I made friends with these writers, very often there used to be lunches, high teas, and sometimes early suppers in rich people's homes. So then, when I'd gone to these big houses, I felt like saying, can I stay in your house? I didn't have a place to stay. I had moved out of the hostel. I didn't have money. But I wanted to stay on in Bombay because there was much to learn about the politics of publishing, money of this, and various other things. So I wrote this poem as a proposal to ask, can I stay in your house? So the proposal says, the proposal says, pull your ceiling halfway down and you can create a mezzanine for me. Your walls open into cupboards. Is there an empty shelf for me? Let me grow in your garden with your roses and prickly pears. I'll sleep under your bed and watch TV in the mirror. Do you have an ear on your balcony? I am singing from your window. Open your door. Let me in. I am resting at your doorstep. Call me when you are awake.
Sindhu, now you must read When It Rains in Dharamsala. You want to hear it, right?
Okay, so this poem, When It Rains in Dharamshala, this was written in Dharamshala when there was a torrential rain there. And let me tell you, Cherrapunji is very near from here. And with all my due respect to Cherrapunji, I want to brag about Dharamshala's rain. In Dharamshala, when it rains, July, August, September, 3 months of torrential rain. Sometimes it keeps on raining for 3-4 days continuously. Sometimes you forget there is another day called sunny day. And when it rains there, it's just terribly big rains. And sometimes when you are in your house, you feel that this house is going to be washed down to the Kangra Valley. But the best time to come to Dharamshala is during the rainy season. You know why? It's not for the rains. It's in between the rains, when the rains have stopped, when the sky is clear and blue. And from the height of McLeodganj hill town, you can look down into the Kangra Valley and see minute details of these small houses, and some of them with a whiff of smoke out of the chimney, and down in the plains where you see pine wood forest. In between you see small stretches of roads, and sometimes if you're lucky you also get to see HRTC bus, state bus, emerging and getting lost into the forest. And further down you could see Pong Lake. There's a lake in Dharamshala. No, you do not get to see. Only during rainy season you get to see it, because the sky is clear. And beyond the lake you could still see rivulets feeding into the lake. And this is only half the scenario. You need to turn, look up the majestic Doladhar mountain ranges. Right up there is the snow-peaked mountains. And after that, there is a layer of rocky mountains, majestically rising 4,000 meters above sea level. Then the pinewood forest dotted with red flower rhododendrons. And further down, then you also get to see McLeodganj, and it's all the bustling town with TV tower and radio dishes and all of that. So this is Dharamshala. Now, if you ever want to come to Dharamshala, which you must, I'm falling short of representing Himachal tourism, come to Dharamshala, but do not come with cheap Chinese umbrellas. वो फट जाएगा. They'll go tatters like tissue papers. आपको चाहिए जलंधर का छाता, लंबा वाला. So come to Dharamshala during rainy season with Jalandhar ka chhata, because the rain over there is it's going to be like this. And here I'm talking about a room I have rented. So it says, when it rains in Dharamshala, raindrops wear boxing gloves. Thousands of them come crashing down and beat my room. Under its roof, my room cries from inside, wets my bed, my papers. Sometimes the clever rain comes from behind my room. The treacherous walls lift their heels and allow a small flood into my room. I sit on my island nation bed and watch my country in flood. Notes on freedom, memoirs of my prison days, letters from college friends, crumbs of bread and Maggi noodles rise sprightly to the surface, like a sudden recovery of a forgotten memory. 3 months of torture. Monsoon in the needle-leaved pines. Himalaya, rinsed clean, glistens in the evening sun. Until the rain calms down and stops beating my room, I need to console my tin roof, who has been on duty from the British Raj. this room has sheltered many homeless people. Now captured by mongooses and mice, lizards and spiders, and partly rendered by me. A rented room for home is a humbling existence. My Kashmiri landlady at 80 cannot return home. We often compete for beauty, Kashmir or Tibet. Every evening I return to my rented room. But I'm not going to die this way. There has got to be some way out of here. I cannot cry like my room. I have cried enough in prisons and in small moments of despair. There has got to be some way out of here. I cannot cry. My room is wet enough.
It gets to me every time. I guess we should, we also brought along some other Tibetan writers' writings so that you can hear them, so that you can hear what the literature sounds like, because of course Tibetan writers are now spread all over the world. Many of them are still in Tibet under occupation. They cannot write freely. They know that if you write the wrong thing, if you say the wrong thing, you can still go to prison. You still suffer and you lose your job. I mean, there are many different consequences. So we just, I guess, want to bring their writing to you too. And of course, I think for us, some writers like to, some writers like to say they write only for art's sake, only for, for the beauty of the word itself. And that is a beautiful sentiment. But I think for us, we cannot forget that we live in exile because that is our reality. We face it every day, right? The exile means many different things, but sometimes if you just come down to very small concrete details, it means, for instance, when I was with my friends yesterday, going to Umananda temple and Kamakhya temple, we passed a roundabout and I saw all these different flags. And, there were flags from many different nations. And then I saw the Bhutanese flag because our Bhutanese friend was with us. And I saw the Tibetan flag. And it meant something very important to me because we do not just see the Tibetan flag anywhere. It is as a dispossessed nation, it is always very special, and we're always very grateful to see that flag because it shows us we are still here, and that we will continue to be here for the next 100 years, for the next 1,000 years. Just one other small thing that exile means is, we cannot participate in the Olympic Games. No Tibetan has ever won an Olympic medal, ever. And no Tibetan has ever won Miss World or even gotten a chance to compete. Right? For Indians, it was a great moment of pride and glory, I remember, because I was there when Aishwarya Rai and Sushmita Sen got to get up on those global stages and represent India to the world and to compete. And for us, it means we do not get those moments. So every small chance that we see when Tibet becomes more visible, like when we get to see the Tibetan flag on a roundabout in Guwahati, it becomes very special and it means a lot. So I just want to thank the Brahmaputra Literary Festival and the Assam government and the government of India. So let's see, I think we should start, should we do Puchung first or Janmata? Okay, yeah, why don't you begin with
I'm going to introduce a fellow Tibetan poet and writer and translator called Puchung Tisonan. Some of the poets, you met him in Bangalore at the Poetry Festival. So Bhujung and I share an interesting story. I'm born in India and raised here, studied here. And in between, after my graduation, when I was very, very spirited for the freedom of Tibet, I went to Tibet. I got arrested by the Chinese, I was blindfolded, interrogated, beaten up in jail. I was in Tibet jail under the Chinese for 3 months, and finally they threw me out and said, "You are born in India, you are Indian, get out of here." My friend Bhujung was born in Tibet, and because at that time China was not giving Tibetan education, so parents fear that they will grow up like Chinese, so they have been sending Tibetan children to India to receive Tibetan education. So Bhujung came at the age of 6 from Tibet, and ever since has been living in India, so he started to write. So although Bhujung has a memory of Tibet, it's only a childhood memory. I don't have a memory of Tibet. My memory is the inherited, borrowed memory from my parents. So Bhujung writes this poem called "When Was I Born?" So this is a poem written as an imagined conversation with his mother. Obviously, he cannot go to Tibet. He cannot meet his mother, but he makes this imagined conversation with his mother. And in the Tibetan community, unlike others, we do not mark birthdays. For example, I don't have my birthday. When I was being admitted into school, there were birthdays marked for me. And there were 3 dates of births. I don't have a birthday. I've never celebrated. Neither did Bhujung. But now that there is this birthday thing around in exile, and people are being asked, "What is your birthday?" he is asking his mother, "When was I born?" So he's asking. So this poem, this is the conversation between him and his mother. "Mother, when was I born?" "In the year the river dried." "When was that?" "That was the year when crops failed and we went hungry for many days. We feared that you would never survive." "Was that the year we moved to a new house?" "That was the year when they confiscated our house and divided it among the patriotic party members. We were banished to the cowshed where you were born." "What year was that?" "That was the year when they destroyed the monastery, melted all the bronze images to make bullets. You were born when the dust filled the sky." "Was that the year Grandpa went away?" "That was the year when they sent your grandfather to prison, where he cleaned shit and butchered insects in the fields. You were born when there were no men in our house." "Was I born in the year the walls were pulled down?" "That was the year when they ripped apart the prayer hall, wooden beams were hammered to splinters, frescoes soiled. You were born when a crazy wind blew from the east." "What year was that?" "That was the year they burned scriptures in the village square and sang revolutionary songs in the praise of the party. You were born when blades of grass refused to grow." "Was it the year you stopped singing?" "It was the year they took our neighbor to the hard labor camp. When he sang a traditional song while digging a canal. You were born when people disappeared one after another." "When was that?" "That was the year they wrote the big red slogan on the walls, 'Heads that stick out will be hammered down.' You were born when the sun shied away from our sky." "When was that?" "That was the year your father
That was Pujung Di Sonam, a writer with... Still good, right? Yeah. A writer with many books to his name at this point, who has done very important work bringing Tibetan literature, I think, to people all over, because both Pujung and Yu together have founded Tibet Rights and Black Neck Books, which is an independent Tibetan publishing company. And actually, I mean, I think it is the first independent Tibetan press in the world, because all the presses in Tibet formerly were monastic presses, or private manor house presses, all sort of printing religious materials. And of course now they are state-owned presses that are censored and do not enjoy open freedom. So I just want to highlight how important Black Neck and Tibet Rights is, and the work that Zundu and this writer, Pujung Di Sonam, are doing. And this is actually, so this is Pujung's own book of translations from the Tibetan, written by Tibetan poets inside Tibet. And this is published in India by Black Neck Books, and allows us all to access Tibetan poetry written by poets, often at great expense, because I'm going to read this one poet who he wrote a book, and then he spent 4 years in prison because of this book, because the state thought, oh, he is challenging the Chinese government's presence in Tibet. He is challenging the Chinese narrative, the state narrative, which is that, of course, Tibet has always been a part of China. And I just, before actually I start reading his work, so Zundu talked very briefly about his journey to Tibet, which resulted in a, yes, in you being jailed because you dared to try and go and see our homeland. So I was very lucky. When I was a college student at Harvard, I went, it was kind of a summer abroad thing, and I got a fellowship, and I was going to go and teach English at a Tibetan school in Northeast Tibet. And I didn't know if I would get a visa, because of course it's very difficult for Tibetans to go to Tibet. The government will refuse visas. When you try to go, you were jailed. They don't want exiled Tibetans in Tibet. So I didn't know if I would get a visa, and I think the protocol was we all Tibetans living outside have to, if you're living in the US, then you have to go through the consulate in New York or DC. But I just sort of applied through a Chinese travel agency, and I actually got my visa. So I flew from Boston to Beijing, and then I was going into northeastern Tibet. And for me, it was, I'd always dreamed about going to Tibet, right? And the weirdest thing at first about the whole trip was I was going on the train to northeast Tibet, and I wanted to know when I left, setting out from Beijing, I wanted to know the moment that I was leaving China and entering Tibet, right? Because I'd always dreamed of this moment. And of course, there is no international border anymore, because Tibet has been subsumed into the modern Chinese empire. So it was a very odd feeling. I just kept thinking, am I in Tibet yet? Am I in Tibet yet? Am I in Tibet now? And of course, when I actually reached Tibet, it is very clear. The land looks completely different. The people look different. They speak Tibetan. And everywhere I went, the first question that Tibetans ask, right, when you're in Tibet and you're a Tibetan from outside, the first question they ask is, how is His Holiness the Dalai Lama? They just want to hear about him. And it also just became very clear to me how important India is as a holy land to the Tibetans inside Tibet. You know, we from the outside think of Tibet as the holy land, but when you're inside Tibet, Tibetans think India is the holy land. It's always been the holy land, and now, of course, the Dalai Lama is in India, in exile in Dharamsala. And you know, when you think of all the monasteries and all the teachers and all the texts and all the statues, it's as if from the temples, you know, all the murtis are now in India. A lot of the monasteries, you know, the famous monasteries of Tibet, Sera, Debung, Ganden, Minduling, all these monasteries, they all have duplicate branches in India. And actually the thing is, for these monastic universities, the essence of the university is its teachers, it's the printing presses, it's the texts, and all that essence, Sera, Debung, Ganden, the abbots of the monasteries, the teachers of the monasteries, the texts, they're all in India. Which means everything escaped the destruction of the Cultural Revolution. Of course, there was tremendous destruction, there was tremendous devastation, lots of people died, but the essence, the fire of Tibet and of Tibetan resistance has been kept alive, and India helped us do that. So when I went to Tibet and met Tibetans, it was a beautiful thing to see how connected even Tibetans who have never been to India, right? How connected they are to India. And I just wanted to mention that these connections between Tibet and India, and of course Tibetan writers, Pujung himself grew up in Tibet and he came to India, and teachers and writers and texts and words and ideas travel back and forth, and it has kept the Tibetan resistance alive, it has kept the Tibetan language alive. And just one example of that is this poet, Tashirapten, the guy who spent 4 years in Chinese prison just for writing a book. And I will read from his poem, and this is of course translated by Pujung D. Sonam. So Tashirapten, whose pen name is Tevrang, wrote a poem, and it's called Prisoner in Hell. And I just want to read a little bit of the Tibetan so that you can hear what the language sounds like, and so that we can have a little bit of Tibetan literature from Tibet here with us. Nyelkam Kitsuma, Tevrang. Nyelkam ni chaki khartung shikin. Kangdo lakto gyase, kharzong gome chigyin. Prisoner in Hell. Hell is a fortress. Hell is a fortress made from iron and steel, a doorless fortress of shackles and handcuffs. Freedom-loving people are the prisoners in this fortress, or they are criminals who see the darkness of hell. These people have fallen to the darkness of hell for their desire to see freedom. They are the ones who blew vapor from out of their mouths. They are the ones who have raised their fists up in the air. However, according to the decree from hell, each of them is considered a criminal in prison with shackles and handcuffs. The crime they are accused of is their love for freedom. Mother says, amongst the prisoners is my young kid brother, who is said to be the youngest prisoner in the world. Did this kid commit a crime by piling pebbles to play with according to hell's decree? If not, this kid is truly innocent. Freedom, equality, democracy, livelihood, 1 prisoner, 2 prisoners, 3 prisoners, 4 prisoners. This hell is truly hellish. Freedom, equality, democracy, livelihood. One day, will everyone be free from the fortress of this hell? And I want to end this poem actually by mentioning India is a holy land for Tibetans for many reasons. Of course, Buddha, now the Dalai Lama. But another reason that it is holy is the example of its history. India also, like Zundu said, spent 200 years under colonialism and managed to get freedom and have, you know, liberty and equality for its citizens. And I think the Indian example is an example that Tibetans everywhere look to.
Well, so at the moment, now the situation is, in exile, there are 1 lakh Tibetans living in India as refugees. We run the Tibetan government in exile from Dharamshala, Himachal Pradesh. His Holiness the Dalai Lama lives there. Some of the most important NGOs and Tibetan government setup is there. We run a democratically functioning exile government. We have 45 members of parliament, and that's the legislature. In the executives, there is a president of Tibetan government in exile with 7 other ministers. That's the executive. We have a judiciary, although the judiciary doesn't have the power of police or jail to punish criminals, but nonetheless we have a functional Supreme Justice Commission which tries and tests certain illegal issues within the Tibetan community. So in that way we have a functioning democracy in exile. 50,000 Tibetans live in Nepal, Bhutan, and also in Europe and America and everywhere. So that makes 150,000 Tibetans living outside Tibet. 6 million Tibetans, which is 60 lakhs. This is the main and majority of the Tibetan population inside Tibet under Chinese occupation. In India, Tibetan community mostly are set up in different other pockets of Tibetan refugee camps, and Bhutan and Nepal, we always are very grateful, although we understand that they are themselves under tremendous Chinese pressure, and still they have been hosting almost about 20,000 Tibetans between Nepal and Bhutan. We have Bhutanese friends here, we have friends from Ladakh also. We always consider our Tibetan way of thinking is that all across the Himalayas and Tibet, we are all the same people and similar language and dialects. There are shared common religious festivities and various other things. We consider ourselves as the same people. Now, in Tibet today, what is really happening there? Tibet totally is under Chinese occupation. This has been under Chinese occupation for past 60 years. There's Chinese military, Chinese office, government, everything. And most importantly, youth, the youngsters are not receiving Tibetan education. All the education are being done in the form of Chinese language education. So in a day, in a school, if there are 6 periods studying science, geography, mathematics, most of them are being done in Chinese language. So therefore, Tibetan students are able to receive only 1 period of Tibetan language. Therefore, there's a constant fear that younger generation Tibetans are growing up more like Chinese. So there is this resistance from inside. Tibetan resistance has been going on for the past 60 years, and resistance is still very, very strong inside. In the recent times, China has been exploiting Tibet for its natural resources, most importantly lithium, for all the batteries in the world. And if you check your mobile phones, you will find most of the batteries are made in China. China says that the highest quality and the largest amount of lithium is found in Tibet, and so they're mining. So in Tibet, because it's a small population, a big country, China has been mining left, right and center. There are craters and craters of empty land dug out, and all these resources are going to China and make cheap made in China products. This is how China has actually created the new colonialism, where the promises of electric buses in China, what is called the hybrid cars, much of this battery is actually coming from Tibet. So when we talk about China and Tibet, we hear if this is China, which is a 9.6 million square kilometer of land, which is 3 times the size of India. India is 3.2 million square kilometer. China is 9.6 million square kilometer. Out of that, 2.5 million square kilometer is Tibet, which is one-fifth of China's territory. Mongolia, which is another occupied country, is 1.8 million square kilometer. There's another country, East Turkestan also. East Turkestan is 1.8, Mongolia is 1.2 million square kilometer, and Manchuria, who used to rule over China for 200 years, today is completely lost and vanished. And और आज भारत में मंचूरिया मतलब चिकन मंचूरियन, उसकी औकात जो है एक खाने के नाम पे रह गया, और कोई भी भारतीय नहीं बोल सकते कि वो एक समय इतना बड़ा राष्ट्र था. So China was under Manchus for 200 years till 1911 when there was a revolution. So Manchuria, Mongolia, East Turkestan put together, real China is only 40%. So this is what we need to understand. 2 days ago there was Chinese government criticizing Prime Minister Modi ji for traveling to Arunachal. Arunachal Pradesh is a part of India. It became part of India in 1914 in an agreement called Megmohan Treaty between Tibet and India. So it is a part of India today, but they continue to protest this. So therefore, today issue of Tibet is as much an issue of India, and of course all across the Himalayas and Assam. There was a time in the past, in the history, where Assamese used to receive salt from Tibet. Yak tails business, and cheese and butter and yogurt used to come from Tibet. From Assam, bags full of rice used to come to Tibet, because rice does not grow in Tibet. So rice used to travel to Tibet through the Natula Pass, through Kalimpong. So this was our traditional brotherhood, civilizational relationship. If India has any civilizational relationships in the north, it was Tibet. So one small request in my conclusion: never say China border. The moment you say China border, हो गया. कभी मानना नहीं है. उन्होंने कब्जा किया, ठीक है, चल रहा है. And there will be a future time when they will go back to their own country. But we should not accept this. So China border मन से निकाल देना. बोलना तिब्बत. भूटान के साथ क्या बॉर्डर है? तिब्बत. नेपाल के साथ क्या बॉर्डर है? तिब्बत. लद्दाख के साथ क्या बॉर्डर है? तिब्बत. अरुणाचल के साथ क्या बॉर्डर है? Tibet. We have to remember this. And when we remember this, we keep this in mind, we stay united. And we are the same people. And whatever greatness and the secrecy with which we maintain our religion and culture, even after 60 years of Chinese occupation, is purely because of the culture and the religion we received from India. We do not have guns to fight. We don't have money to fight. We have a stronger force, and that is the force of love and compassion that we receive from India. So India has given us a strength which will go on forever, and this is how inextricably we are bonded together, and we are therefore one. Thank you.
Yeah, let's do a Q&A. If anyone has questions.
Any questions?
Yeah, I have a request.
I'll get to you.
I just have one request, not question. I just want to have one more from Bushung, that soulful word, because it was so soulful that I was lost to myself and lost to the time of Tibet and his struggles, and how he, created this thing out of his struggles and created such a soulful number. Please have one from Bushung.
Yeah. So Bujung Di Sonam studied MA Economics from MS University Baroda. He was 1 year senior to me in school, and he continued to write. Today he is poet, writer, translator, and publisher. And just as Diki earlier introduced us, Pujung and I, we created a group called Tibet Writes, WRITES, Tibet Writes. And this was founded in year 2002. And since then, we've been writing, publishing, translating. So I'm going to read one more poem from Pujung Disonam. Maybe next year I'll send him here.
It'll be lovely.
Me. So Pujung Disonam, good thing with him is if he comes here, he can sing songs, playing the Tibetan guitar, damnye. I cannot play, I cannot sing. So one poem. This is called Lone. World so full of people, each one lonely within, strives to find that someone who fits their distorted ideals. While the years go passing by, we accumulate chains of wrinkles, each one a sad tale, a failed love, a broken dream. World so full of people, each one a lonesome soul, basks in the fading rays of life. Desires this, hopes that, we accumulate pangs of failure, each one filed behind another, like dunes of desert sand that keep repeating endlessly. And this is a book I have read from. It's called Muses in Exile. Again, this is the first anthology of Tibetan writing in English, in translation and original English. And this is edited by Pujung Disonam. Now you saw two books, yeah? This book of anthology, Muses in Exile, about 120 poems written by 20 odd Tibetan poets, again self-published by our group, Tibet Writes. This book of poems, Burning the Sun's Grade, translations of poems written in Tibet, translated by Pujung Disonam, again our publication. And Diki had earlier talked about old demons, new deities, if you want to Google or find another way. In India, it's been published by Navayana. Yeah? So this was the first collection of Tibetan short fiction. And Diki is working towards the first Tibetan non-fiction collection. And this is what she's working on. Some of us are making our contributions to it. Okay, next question.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts from the Tibetan island. And already you have mentioned that you have emotional links to the Northeast, specifically. So I have a small bit of song here, Tibetan song. I will play for 1 minute or half minute,
Okay.
and kindly translate in English.
Ah, okay, there's a big, tall task. Let's see. But I have to see what dialect this is. There are many, many dialects, yeah? Yeah, thank you. So, music and singing, it's one thing that exiled Tibetans have done so well in understanding the sentiments of the people and expressing. And we have produced not many writers, but so many singers. In fact, if you ask Tibetans, every other person is a singer. Because traditionally, Tibetans are always singing. They're harvesting, they're riding horses, they're always singing. And dance, group dance, circle dances. Always, everywhere, Tibetans are singing and dancing, and they drink this fermented barley drink and rice fermented drink called chang. Especially on dosa, we are missing chang today. So chang again. So this song the gentleman played is in praise of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So constant refrain is Kone kyam kui shenopu Dalai Lama. So this word Dalai Lama is Dalai Lama, anglicized Dalai Lama. The word comes from Mongolian term called Dalai Lama, meaning ocean of wisdom. So the link between the Mongolians and the Tibetans. When Genghis Khan invaded, plundered countries across the world, Tibet was the only country he did not invade. Even during Kublai Khan and right up to Gurshi Khan, Tibet was one country that was never invaded and occupied. Why? Because the Tibetans and the Mongolians had a secret pact that we would give them the Buddhist teaching, which we learned from India, and they would give us military protection. So the third Dalai Lama was the one who was given the title Dalai Lama by the Mongolian king, and posthumously Dalai Lama 1 and 2 were given the title posthumously after their death. Fourth Dalai Lama, diplomatically, politics by Tibetans, was recognized out of Mongolia. A Mongolian child was recognized as the fourth Dalai Lama. Fifth was born in Tibet. Sixth was born in, anyone? Sixth Dalai Lama was born in Tawang. He was born in Tawang. At the time, Tawang was a part of Tibet. Now it's part of Arunachal Pradesh in India. So sixth Dalai Lama was born in Tawang, which is now part of India. So this is a series of Dalai Lamas. So the bonding between the Dalai Lama and the Tibetans is 400 years of bonding, of leadership and faith from the Tibetan people. We love and respect His Holiness the Dalai Lama more than our parents. Yeah. So this is the Tibetan people believe that the Dalai Lama is the reincarnation of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of love and compassion. So he is bound to come back and lead the Tibetan people, and we have that kind of respect. So therefore, single-handedly, he has today not only led the Tibetans in exile in this way, but gave a great sense of dignity, even in exile, and hope that one day we will get back to Tibet. So now look at this. China tried to change Tibet for the past 60 years, and they failed. Today, young Chinese who are millionaires, billionaires, when they've achieved everything their money and education could get, when they still want more, peace of mind, it's not there in China. So they go to Tibet, bow down in front of the Tibetan lamas and say, give me Buddhist teachings. So today, China, instead of changing us, today Tibetans are changing China. And again, just as His Holiness says, India is our guru, we are our chela. But His Holiness says, but we are responsible chela. Because we have not lost what we have received from India. But it is missing in India today. So we are now giving it back to India. And if you know, in Varanasi, in Sarnath, there is a university called Central Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies. 400 Tibetan scholars, including scholars from all across the Himalayas. We are today translating Tibetan texts that got translated into Tibetan before Nalanda fire. All the textbooks that were translated into Tibetan from Pali, Brahmi, Sanskrit. Today, these Tibetan scholars are translating them back into Pali, Hindi, Sanskrit, and English. So, this is the return of the Buddhist treasures back to India.
We have one more question here.
Yes.
I'm Devakshi.
Yeah.
I'm from Assam University Diffu campus. So the whole session is very insightful. I have a small curiosity actually. So my question is, there are some Chinese writers who are exiled for writing against the real scenario of China. So according to you, do you feel what kind of similarity or the dissimilarity they have? I mean, as a exiled Chinese writer, or what kind of what kind of? I mean, my question is what is the similarity or the dissimilarity between the exiled Chinese writers and exiled Tibetan writers?
Yes.
Thank you.
I would say, well, the Chinese government, the Chinese state is a totalitarian state. It is not a free democratic country. And, you know, in the Chinese empire today, there is Chinese, there's Tibetans, there's also Mongolians, there is people from East Pakistan, and of course there are many Chinese dissident writers and thinkers who also are suffering from the restrictions of the Chinese state. One thing is, so of course a free Tibet or a free East Turkestan would mean freedom and democracy, not only for Tibetans and not only for Mongolians, not only for people from these oppressed and suppressed regions, but also freedom for the people of China. Because of course, the totalitarian state at some point, I think we have seen in history that it is not possible for these regimes to continue to oppress and restrict and imprison people, right? Because at some point, people demand freedom. At some point, people, as we see now, people are writing, people are going to jail for their beliefs, people are losing their lives, and I think we will see that the Chinese regime will have to change. And we will continue to see more, I think, dissent and more uprising in China itself. And one thing that is perhaps, so across the board, maybe it's a similar situation, but of course, in mainland China versus these regions that the Chinese state has subsumed, there is, I think, a great disparity in how brutal the Chinese state can be. To take the example of Tibetan writer Wusser, you know, Lhasa, where she used to live and work, became too difficult for her to live in, and she went and began to live in Beijing, where she has slightly more freedom. Of course, when she applied for a passport, because she was given various awards. She was given a residency at Brown University to come and be a writer in residence. And when she applied for a passport to travel, the Chinese government denied her because they want to continue to keep people like Wusser under their territory, essentially. They don't want them to go out and have more freedom to speak, right? But I think what we can see from these writers is they find a way to get their message out. No matter what restrictions the government places, they know how to get their voices out. They know how to get their demands for freedom out.
Yeah, I met a number of Chinese activists, intellectuals, democracy activists in different other countries. So I see that there is constant demand for freedom, free press within China. When we talk about China today, I have to make this very clear that we are not against China. We believe that just as any other country, China has every right to be free and democracy and dignified. Therefore, we are not against China. If we are talking only about freedom of Tibet. So, because this is a literary forum, it's not a political forum. What we are talking about is where these literatures are coming from and what are their backgrounds. Yeah, we are not against China. We want China. In fact, China is our neighbor. whether they go out today or tomorrow or after 20 or 20 years, they are still going to be our neighbor. And we wish them well. But we won't wish them to be only as our neighbor, not as our boss. So this is the differentiation and how clearly we want to show it this way.
And
yes.
we actually quite close to our allotted time. We'll take the last question from him, and then I would request you to end up the session with a request that you end up with one of your poems, please.
Okay.
Thank you. I missed your decision. I just come 5-10 minutes ago. But I believe, honestly, that Tibet will be free very soon. Because I attended 15 years back an exile government press meet in Guwahati. Basically, I am a journalist. And I have written article that Tibet will be free. I know the facts and about the human rights violations in China. But I used to, you'll be happy. I used to say, I meet you Dalai Lama. He blessed me. And I believe the way he teaches you, your people in exile, certainly you will be free, because in this world now, this is the way. Otherwise, by gun, people cannot free or people cannot go to up. So I missed your season, but still I have a faith that don't worry, your people will be free very soon, but your path should be by your Dalai Lama. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll take one last question.
Thank you very much, Tenzin duo, both of you being Tenzin. I've worked with political nuns in the past in Tibetan communities, but here today it is really impressive to hear political poets. You talk about a very idealistic view of Tibet in a way, that it is the Tibet-India border, Tibet-Bhutan border and so forth, which is a very beautiful, romantic idea which we should pursue. But on the grounds, in reality, when we think about the population transfer that has happened, how actually there are more Han Chinese in Tibet perhaps than Tibetans, and also on political level, when even His Holiness has started to accommodate the idea of the middle way, Tibet as part of a bigger China, and especially when countries like India, so favorable to Tibet, but still insisting on one China policy. Now we need to actually campaign and change the minds of our leaders here in the free world. But when you look at these scenarios, then there's the ideal and the real world. I have difficulty, because I have friends in both camps, to reconcile the two. How do you reconcile this? The ideal world of having Tibet-India border and the real situation of the middle way approach, seeing China as seeing Tibet as part of a bigger China, free China though.
I mean, I take my inspiration and examples from history. I don't think the idea of an independent Tibet is just a romantic idea, because Tibet, as it is presently a part of the empire of Tibet, is only that way because of guns, because of tanks, because the Chinese regime doesn't mind killing people, to put it bluntly, right? In 2008, recently, we saw how many uprisings there were across the Tibetan plateau. People rising up, demanding freedom, demanding independence, and that was put down only because of Chinese soldiers that were armed with rifles and were willing to shoot people. I think if we just look at history, I mean, the Nazi government fell, the British government in India, the British Empire fell, the Ottoman Empire fell. The nature of empires is to fall, because I think our desire for freedom is greater than their desire for oppression.
Yeah. Completely on that part. Well, you call it romanticization, you call it idealism, but I believe in idealism. I am a romantic man, and without my romance, I cannot be alive. I will be a man of statistics, boring facts and figures. Therefore, I write poetry. And if Shri Aurobindo had not started by thinking of a free and independent India, even at that time when most of the Indians had no idea that India is going to be free, when British Empire used to say, you know, the sun never sets on the British Empire. And this is how, you know, empires shut down the people of the colonies. Yeah, last year I went to the UK, and there the sun sets on British Empire twice. It's so small. और हमारा राजस्थान जैसे तो उतना ही है. It's not bigger than Rajasthan. और ब्रेक्सिट के बाद उसको कुछ रहेगा नहीं. So there was a point in time. So what I see today in China, there are annually 76 to 80,000 cases of protests. We do not know because it's never reported in international media because they keep the information. But it's happening. More Chinese want freedom, democracy, and free press, and right to vote to elect their own president instead of president making himself forever president. So freedom, this is the biggest force in the world. It's not nuclear weapons, it's not atomic bombs. Freedom is the biggest force in the world. And I believe that although my country is not free, our people are free. We have freedom in every heart of the Tibetan people. And as long as I believe that if we count the number of freedoms in the Tibetan people's hearts and looking at the Chinese government, they are very insecure. Xi Jinping himself is so very insecure because there is a power struggle going on or something may happen to him. There's so much of insecurity. I believe in this, that as long as there is freedom in the hearts of people, there is going to be freedom in the country. So on this note, we will close here. Thank you very much for coming
with part of your writing skill.
Thank you.
Who says you're not a good... Thank you both for joining us here and sharing your valuable insights. It was indeed quite an enlightening session. Thank you once again. Distinguished guests, with these very informative and interesting sessions on various topics, we conclude our sessions.
One small announcement.
Yes.
This book, at the moment, is sold out at the bookshop. I'm sorry,
I'm just coming to that.
Many copies. But I have ordered 200 copies from Dharamshala. It's coming here day after tomorrow. So, Lawyer's book stall is going to have a well stock of this book, Kora, my book of poems and stories.
That's great.
It's only for 50 rupees. Buy copies, read, gift copies to other people.
Absolutely.
And spread the rumors of love and compassion.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you.